Hey, what's up guys? And today I'm bringing you my Season 8 draft analysis for the NPL majors. I didn't really want to do a normal draft analysis video because you've seen a ton of those. Everyone does the same thing. They analyze, what Amon does, a little bit of how it fits onto their team, but not really how they went through the drafting process. So I want to talk a little bit about that and also make a little bit of an educational video on how I draft because I know at least one person wanted me to make that, and I think it would help because I see a lot of people use a lot of different drafting strategies, and I've tried a lot of drafting strategies, and this is the one I feel works the best because I feel like I've improved at drafting over the past like 2 years I've played draft. So if you bear with me for a sec, I'll just hop right in and show you how I draft. So the first thing about drafting is a lot of people like to have a plan. They like to, make draft plans before the draft even starts. Just list all the mons they want to draft. Usually these draft plans, they're good, but they're also optimistic. The thing about having an optimistic draft plan is you're going to get sniped almost guaranteed because optimistic draft plans usually have very popular mons on them. Like if I say I want to draft, a Fire Water Grass Core of Manaphy, Shaman, Victini, that's not going to happen because Manaphy will probably go round 1 or 2, Victini will probably go round 1 or 2, Shaman will probably go round 3 or 4, and you probably won't be able to get all of them. And you probably don't even want to draft any of those round 1, and you probably don't want to draft Shaman round 3 just to get your core. And if you're sniped on any of those, and a lot of other grasses are taking, like for example, if you get sniped on Shaman and you think, wow, since I've made this draft plan like this, rather than reacting to what other people have taken to leave my options open, now I'm left with an open slot for grasses and I have to take something like Decidueye, which doesn't fit my speed tiers, doesn't fit my offenses, it doesn't do anything for me. So what I like to do, as you can see on the slide, is to start with no plan. Just see what I get rounds 1 and 2. Usually try to draft 2 threats that synergize really well together for rounds 1 and 2. And then try to draft, all the things you need for a draft after that. So I sort of draft whatever I want for rounds 1 and 2 and then sort of go from there. And the plan usually involves not even like a full plan at any point in the draft, unless it's like a points draft and I'm nearing the end. Because then I'll start adding up the points. Same with the tier, I'll start adding up the points. Because the more you plan, the more susceptible you are to creating a team that's fragile to snipes. So if you look at your team, then you append one mon to it that fits it well, and that mon gets sniped, you can just think of another mon that fits it well. And you just build it one mon bigger until you have everything covered, which I think is the best way to draft. Usually I plan 2 picks ahead, but that's basically how I do it usually. So I mentioned mons I like to draft. I think that can be a little bit confusing because I don't condone, if you're trying to draft competitively, I don't condone drafting whatever you want round 1, because drafting a mon you want, like let's say you want, I don't know, something like Ferrothorn, you're really good at using Ferrothorn, so you pick it round 1. I really don't believe you should do that. I believe Ferrothorn is around 2 at the earliest, 3 is usually where it goes, 3 to 4. Should pick it up around there. And if you don't get it, then that's okay. But you shouldn't be set around using a particular mon unless it's one of the my top 16 mons in the format. So these are the mons that I believe are better than anything else allowed in the format, and I think you should, and since there are 16 of them, you should be able to get at least one of them in round 1. So the first 4 I have in parentheses because they're banned in a lot of leagues, but not every league. So I'll sort of go through them. Aegislash, obviously like the most broken mon allowed in the NPL. That was drafted pick one, round 1, pick 1. Mega Mawile, I like a lot. It has no switch-in, so you can invest a lot into bulk. It has one of the best defensive typings in the game. It has access to Intimidate and Rocks and Priority. It's like everything you would want in a Mega and a Steel and a Fairy, especially if you have Wish Pass support for it. Landorus Eye, I think, is an insane breaker, and being above 101 speed means it can actually be a reliable revenge killer in League, whereas in OU and ladder tiers it's not fast enough to be a revenge killer, it's more of a wall breaker, while in draft it can be both, which is terrifying. It's also an insanely good Z user because it gains access to Z Fly. Tapu Lele, again, really strong breaker. This is banned a lot. I don't necessarily think it's ban worthy, but it's usually banned, so I put it in parentheses. Then I have the rest listed. I can sort of go over them in a little bit of detail of what I think you should draft with each of these. I think I actually included 15, but you can think of the 16th as like maybe a Thundurus or a Manaphy. So, Landorus T, one of the best mons to draft, or I guess I should start with Celesteela. One of the best mons to draft round 1. You should definitely look to take a reliable hazard setter and a good wish passer with Celesteela. You want to maximize the quality of your Fairy Dragon Steel core. I think something like Mega Gardevoir or like Garchomp would work really well with Celesteela. Because with Celesteela, you really want to play the hazard game because you're going to be clicking Leech Seed a lot, and they're going to be switching around a lot, and you're going to be staying in. And Celesteela taking rocks damage is a lot more annoying than you would think, even though it's not weak to them. For Landorus, a lot of things work with Landorus, but I would definitely suggest getting something that offensively threatens bulky waters, and something that prevents ice types from doing a lot of work to you. With Landorus, something that beats bulky waters, maybe something like a Superior or something like that. Or like a nice dragon, like a Latios or something like that, to help you with bulky waters and everything that they're going to be doing to you. Mega Latios, in my opinion, the best Mega besides Mega Mawile allowed. It's ridiculously good. Like, it covers a lot of bases for your team. There are a lot of ways you can go off of having a Mega Latios. I think the best way to go about it is picking nice breakers so you you don't have to run defensive Mega Latios every week, or you don't have to run offensive every week. You have the option to run defensive as well, which I think is one of its better sets. Coco, you want to draft. Hold on, let me take a drink real quick. Coco, you definitely want to draft a lot of momentum around it. It's one of the better breakers in the game, and it gives you a lot of momentum. Something like a Diggersby, which can break and have momentum at the same time, is really effective with Tapu Koko. Mew, you can pretty much draft anything because every draft needs a Psychic type, and you can sort of just start building out your cores from there because they can do anything. With Mega Kangaskhan, you want to draft a really nice cleric and something that can take wishes. I think a Tapu Fini is a perfect pairing with Mega Kangaskhan because it can receive the wishes from King, it can prevent Toxics from going up on King, and it can supplement its sweep by offensively pressuring the opponent and using taunt. Mega Gallade, you're definitely going to want a Pursuit Trapper and Dark types to help counter the bulky Psychics that switch into you. Something like a Alolan Muck or Crocodile or something like that would be really nice with Mega Glade, or Greninja even, which also gives you the momentum and hazards to sweep with Glade more easily. Mega Lop, very similar to Glade, you're going to want Dark types to Pursuit Trap bulky Psychics. Like, I'm not advising you to draft like Bisharp round 2, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. I think your first 2 rounds should be mons that work offensively well together. I don't think you should spend points on defensive cores rounds 1 and 2. Unless you're picking Celestial, which can be used for both, but mostly defensively, but it's kind of broken defensively. The reason why you don't want to pick defensive mons early is that you can pick up defense that's almost as reliable for lower tiers. For example, I'm not going to pick a Toxapex really early because you can pick up a bulky water that has haze and has not quite as much bulk, but has the reliability of Toxapex for less points than Toxapex, even though Toxapex is better than them. Toxapex is rated highly because it's an OU and it's one of the best bulky waters, but it's not better by a lot. It's just better enough that it's one of the only ones used in OU. So its price is inflated in League. Then I have Kieran Black. You're definitely going to want hazard removal and momentum with Kieran Black. It's very important. Momentum to get it in for free, and hazard removal so it doesn't take 25% and it can wall hits more easily. You're also going to look to complete a very good Fairy Dragon Steel Core with it. Jirachi, same thing, you want a Fairy and a Dragon, and you want another good rocker so Jirachi doesn't have to rock a lot. Diancie, you're going to want a really solid offensive ground type. Like if you get Diancie Landorus T, it's really solid because although that's kind of rare to be able to get that, but even like Diancie Garchomp or something like that is really powerful because you're going to be able to pressure off bulky steals that pressure Diancie really well. With Zardex, like easily the most important thing is getting good hazard removal, but it's also important to get mons that cause them to bring their like bulky grasses and stuff that allow you to set up. Like if you draft a good like Earthquake spammer with Charizard X, and they're gonna bring their Shaman, they're gonna bring their Decidueye or whatever, and you're gonna be able to get off free hits. I apologize about that. Mega Guard, it's going to have Wish a decent amount because you're going to be bringing defensive a decent amount, so mons that get better with Wish passing are solid with Guard. Also hazard removal because Guard hates taking Stealth Rock damage. Zygarde 50 is a little bit strange because I don't have all that much experience with it, but you're basically just going to want to fill out a Fairy Dragon Steel Core, and drafting a separate mon with a 4x weakness is really nice for Zygarde, because if you're ever against a mon that can't hit you with HP Ice, then you can set up and win. Or if the mon has HP Ice for Zygarde, then you can have your other mon that's 4x weakened and they can do better. I don't normally advocate the mono 4x weak drafts, but they work well with Zygarde because Zygarde's able to set up and win on the spot, so it really pressures them a lot more than, let's say you have T-Tar Heatran. They can just bring a fighting move and hit both your mons, even if you have like a Shuckleberry on Heatran or whatever. And Torrent-T is not necessarily a powerful mon in and of itself, but it's really nice glue for teams. And since I only included 15 mons plus the broken mons, I could also put Garchomp on here. I think it's generally stronger than Zygarde 50, but Zygarde 50 is more potential when placed on a good draft. So I'm going to move into a bit of a checklist on things I like to have in a draft. First thing, I think this is a little bit overrated, Water, Fire, Grass Core. So you need a bulky water. That's 100% required for a draft in my opinion. To take a little bit of weaker neutral hits, a lot of waters are able to take those and heal them off really well. Grass is really important for ground spam. There are 2,000 arrows users drafted in every draft format, so you're gonna want resist for that. And Z moves are a thing, so you can't like expect your flying type to switch into ground types anymore. They're gonna carry like continental crush for you. And then I have fire in parentheses because fire works with water and grass offensively, but defensive fire types are straight ass in draft format because they take 25% from rocks and have not the best resistances, and they're weak to a lot. So I wouldn't advise you to go out of your way to draft a Rotom Heat or whatever, or an Arcanine, but they are good mons. But I wouldn't say, wow, you need to draft a Rotom Heat round 4 because it's a bulky fire type and you need to complete your water fire grass core. It's just, that's not how it works. And the important core for real is the Fairy Dragon Steel core. This is absolutely necessary to check the biggest threats in the format. The biggest threats include DD users like Salamence and like Swordsdance, Scarchomp, stuff like that. If you don't have a Fairy Dragon Steel core, they can limit their amount of coverage moves and run more support moves that can make it even harder for you to win. So they're very nice for having immunities, especially Fairy and Steel. Steel being immune to poison, Fairy being immune to Dragon, and Dragon having a bunch of resistances that help you. Dragon will make you a lot less weak to electric types as well. And lastly, you have the Psychic, Dark, and then Fighting in parentheses core. Because Fighting, like Fire, isn't that great defensively, and it's more there to offensively fit with Psychic and Dark, though I think of the 9 types on this list, I think Fighting is the least important. Like, you really need a bulky Psychic on a draft because Mons like Lopunny and Mega Gallade are going to do really a ton of work if you don't have Mons like Reuniclus or Cresselia, something like that, to take Psychic hits. And then Dark types to help your Psychic out, especially since Dark is just one of the best types in the game. It gets all the best moves like Knockoff, and it's immune to Psychic. It's really important to have one, and your fighting coverage is usually covered because there are a lot of flying types in the game, and you're going to have a Fairy already and a Psychic to resist fighting moves. And then if you drafted a good Steel, like I think you should draft a good Steel every single draft, the Dark is going to put in a lot more work because people won't bring as much offensive Fairy moves. And lastly, a Ground type. This is important so you don't get Volt Switched on by everything. And Ground is also probably the most broken offensive type in League because of access to Z moves in Gen 7. It's really important that you have a Ground check in a Grass type and the Ground spammer yourself. 1, to set up rocks, 2, because there aren't a lot of EQ resists, and Edgequake is really good coverage, especially when Stone Edge or Earthquake can be a Z Crystal. And then I say 2 good hazard setters. By this I mean you can have like 4 Stealth Rockers. They can all be terrible, and I'll say you have terrible hazards because, like, let's say your hazards are like Infernape, Azelf, and I don't know, Aerodactyl. Those ones aren't going to get up rocks without taking 70% or more damage, and you're going to be at a disadvantage from setting up rocks rather than at an advantage. You're going to want 2 good hazard setters. Something like Metagross that sets up rocks because it forces an offensive switch after it's switched into a move defensively. Something like Hippowdon, which can switch into like an electric type. If they go for a Volt Switch, then they're going to need to switch out when you go for rocks. If they go for HP Ice even, you can take 2 of them, and they're going to fear an Earthquake and have to switch out. So Mons like that are really important just to set up rocks. Rocks are very important in League format, so you can punish people for bringing their Rotom Heats, as I said before. And just in general, a lot of the flying types and flying dragons are the biggest threats in the format. You want to be able to deal with them really well. And this, I put Recovery on here. This is more of a new one because of last season's Minors Draft. Reliable Recovery is really important so you can have a flexible play style in League. Reliable Recovery is important so you can play a stally team. You can bring all the toxic spam you want, but even if their team is full toxic, you're not going to win if you don't have any recovery on your team. So recovery is important just to be able to beat more defensive teams. And this next point is something that I see overlooked way too much. I would say this is the #1 tip to more experienced players on this list, is to think of how your physical and special split is on both offensively and defensively. Basically, what I see a lot is people stacking physical or special threats, and that's really, really bad, because then you're going to have your opponent running something like max special defense Vaporeon, be able to mono wall your whole team and bring 5 other threats, and you're going to have like no chance at winning that game. Like, obviously that's an extreme example, but you see what I mean. People have drafts with, you know, the 5 physical and 1 special offensive threat, and then you can just bring 1 physical wall and deal with the special threat, and or 2 physical, like all physical walls, and their special threat isn't going to be able to do enough to you, and that person is going to lose the game just because they drafted poorly. In my opinion, having both physical and special options on your team makes your team so much stronger and harder to prep for. Defensively, it's also important, though I think less important, because defensive EVs are more flexible than offensive EVs. They're generally closer to the defensive base stats are generally closer to each other, so you don't need to worry all too much. Like, if you have a Milotic as your Phys-Def wall, it's probably fine, because Milotic can be either Spadef or Phys-Def, even though its Spadef stat is better. I think hazard removal is overrated in the format. I say you need to have a good hazard remover, because if you have, it's the same thing that I said with rocks. If you have, you know, Staraptor, Talonflame as your hazard removal, say I have 2 defoggers, I'm fine. You're not fine. They're going to be terrible. Same thing for, you know, better mons, you know, like Thundurus. Defog Thundurus, not the best. So you're going to want great defoggers, or not even great defoggers. Actually, only 1 good defogger is really important, because the matches where you need to bring defog are pretty rare, and usually you're going to be wanting to run other stuff in that slot. Because if you've drafted a team that isn't weak to hazards, you shouldn't be needing to bring defog every game. Then I put low tier value on here. That's really important for tier drafts, because if you draft low tier value, then you're going to have all good mons on your team. Because the difference between bad low tiers and good low tiers is much bigger than the difference between bad, you know, tier 3s and good tier 3s. Tier 5 and tier 4 to a lesser extent are much more varied than tiers, you know, 1 to 3. So that's really important in my opinion. I skipped over momentum, so I'll talk about that briefly. You're gonna want to have at least 1 pivot on your team, just a mon with U-turn or Volt Switch that can get in your threats more easily. That's pretty self-explanatory. Synergy with round 1 pick, I already talked about this a little bit because I went over the 16 round 1 picks in my opinion. So you're going to want to draft a team around them. I'll sort of go into it when I discuss how I drafted my team for NPL. Setup is important so that your opponent doesn't bring a fully defensive team, be able to stall you out. It just gives you more options later on. Disruption, again, is really important for shutting down whatever strategies they could be anticipating. A lot of the best players in the format run a lot of Encore, run a lot of Taunt, and really are able to shut down teams that way. And one of the more important things, in my opinion, is speed tiers. I have a separate slide for that, so I'll have to change it. You're going to want a couple mons, 110 plus. These are going to be your faster mons. They're going to be your revenge killers. They're going to be mons that win the game for you. Then you want 1 or 2 mons between 100 and 110. and 100 included. I think, in my opinion, 100 and 101 plus are different speed tiers because there are so many top threats at base 100 speed, like Salamence, Manaphy, Victini, and Garchomp is 102, but there are a ton of base 100 threats, so it's really important to have, I'd say, 2 or more mons bigger, faster than base 100, and then one of those has to be, at least one of those should have to be over 110, so you don't lose to stuff like Lotties, especially if there's Mega Latios allowed in your league. That's going to be tough. I put 90 to 100 on here so that base 100s have to run a lot of speed. They're not able to run adamant if you have a strong 90 to 100. I also like to have my 90 to 100 mon be a breaker so that my opponent really is forced to run a fast base 100, which allows it to have very little bulk and be less able to take hits from my sort of weaker mons at faster speed tiers. And 70 to 80, that's mostly there to force stall mons to run a little bit of speed to be able to creep your attackers at 70 to 80 speed tier. I think below 70 that doesn't really matter. You're not really creeping things around there. Generally you might even be the slowest mon on both teams if you have a mon below 50. It's not really going to matter below 70 in my opinion, because people don't really draft breakers that are slower than 70 speed. So now that I've gone over sort of how I draft in detail, I'm going to move on to my draft specifically. So I had 13th pick, I believe, so basically all this stuff was gone. This stuff was gone. So the first mon on this list that wasn't gone was Mega Gallade. So that's what I picked up for round 1. So now that I picked up a Mega Gallade for round 1, I know that I'm going to need a dark type, or maybe even 2 dark types. Stuff that pressures bulky psychics later in the game. But I don't want to get them yet because the dark types the good dark types were taken pretty early. Like David took a round 2 Greninja, and Verd took a round 2 Hydreigon before I even got my round 2 mon. I was actually considering Hydreigon. So one of the best offensive threats left was Thundurus. I've seen Gallade Thundurus used a lot by my friend Jacko, and they work pretty well together. Even though they're at a similar speed tier, they're going to be able to help each other out, especially because they provide that aforementioned physical special split, where Gallade's going to be dishing out massive physical hits. Thundy's going to be dishing out massive special hits. Thundy's a really good Z user. I get a Z budget of 24 points for this draft, so I'm going to want to draft a good 8-point Z user to back Thundy up. So after drafting Thundy, I look at the 8-point tier and pick out a good Z user. I'm not going to spoil what that is yet because the slide has all the picks before it, so I already know what mon I'm getting from there. I just have to figure out when I want to draft it. So after Thundurus is a bit of a pet mon of mine. It's Togekiss, and even though Thundurus and Togekiss share the flying typing, I'm going to be a little bit weak to rocks. They both have defog in this gen, and Togekiss is a very solid defogger. And Togekiss has such flexibility. It's one of the best fairies in the format, in my opinion. It's worse than Feeny and Clefable, Coco, stuff like that. But it's much better than stuff like Sylveon or Florges, in my opinion. Its stall breaking potential is pretty much unmatched, because it has both flinching and cleric and encore, which is ridiculous to all put on one mon. So that's gonna be really fun to use, because right now my team is looking a little bit weak to stall, because even though my mons can set up, they're not really bulky enough to set up versus some mons. like especially if Thunderous takes rocks and Gallade has to take a special hit and the opponent has priority, is going to be a little bit tough. So having a Togekiss to beat those bulkier mons is going to be nice. Togekiss also sort of counts as a bulky psychic counter because Heal Bell or Encore or stuff like that can really disrupt those bulky psychics, and they can pretty much never beat a Togekiss 1v1 because of flinching and status that it can inflict, like Toxic or Thunder Wave. So I do draft a Dark type next. This one, Alolan Muck, fits really well with Gallade, and I'll explain why. Pursuit is a very important thing to have with Mega Gallade, and Alolan Muck is one of the best Pursuit trappers in the game. In my opinion, it's almost as good as Crook. I haven't really used Crook enough or Alolan Muck enough to judge which one is better. They're pretty different mons, but nonetheless, they're both very good Pursuit trappers, and Alolan Muck is going to be really nice on this team. This is my bulky psychic counter. As stated before, Mega Gallade needs to have something to deal with the bulky psychics that threaten it, so Muck just straight up counters them. You might see Muck countering even offensive psychics in OU with AV Poison Touch, I believe was the set that people ran for Tapu Lele back in the day. Either way, Muck is going to be really nice. It has a lot of options with Recycle Figgy and Curse. There are a lot of sets to bring with it, so I'm going to have some fun with it this season. And I feel like it fits really well with the draft. Also, having its only weakness be ground is really nice with Togekiss and Thundurus because I'm really not weak to ground moves. And you're going to see I actually pick up another Levitating Mon next. And yeah, and Muck's only weakness is ground, so I have that covered really well. So I pick Latias up next. It kind of stuck out to me on the draft board because it was by far the best mon left at that point at round 5. And what this does is, one, it gives me a really good defogger for Togekiss and Thundurus. Togekiss is going to be able to switch in on a lot more hits. It's going to be able to not get 2 KO by a lot of things if it has Latias defogging for it. Also, Latias gives me another special attacker to complement Gallade. Gives me another mon to threaten bulky psychics because of its Calm Mind, or even just its Toxic set. It can take psychics and Shadow Balls really well because of its insane special bulk. And it also gives me a dragon, so now I have the dragon and the fairy in my fairy dragon steel core. Still haven't started on my fire, water, grass, or I guess in this case water, grass, and then maybe fire. So I'll move on to my next pick. Again, I like to stress that fairy dragon steel cores are one of the most important things to focus on when you draft. So I picked up a steel next, that being Empoleon. Another defogger. I wanted my hazard game to be on point to help Mega Gallade as much as possible. So I picked up Empoleon, which gets both Stealth Rock and Defog. Gives me a bulky water to start out my fire, water, grass core. Just a really solid mon in general. It has a lot of options. It has a ton of special attack as well as good defensive stats. So it's going to be fun to use. And yeah, I haven't really used it before, but it looked really solid. Generally, I don't think Steel Water is that good of a typing for a bulky water if it's your only bulky water. And by that I mean you're going to want your bulky water to have at least some sort of recovery, and you're going to want your bulky water to be able to take ground hits and fighting hits, just take a lot of neutral hits. And Empoleon has a lot less neutral hits than most bulky waters. It has a lot of resisted hits, it has an immunity, but it doesn't have as many neutral hits. So that's going to be an issue going forward that I'll have to fix. Next, I want something in the 90 to 100 speed tier, and to do that, I pick up Darmanitan. Really nice physical attacker, because right now I have 4 special attackers and 2 physical attackers. So this is the 3rd physical attacker. Really nice breaker. It's gonna force people to bring their, bulky waters and stuff like that. Thunderous is gonna have a good time setting up on. So that's really nice. I draft Darmanitan on a lot of my teams because it's very simple to use for the amount of work it does per game, because basically you want to make your prep time as useful as possible. So if you spend less time worrying about more complicated mons to use, then you're going to have a better team. Like, let's say you spend an hour prepping for a team. Making, a Scarf Darmanitan set takes 3 minutes of that hour. You just need to assess how good it is in the matchup. Say, oh wow, they have one bulky water, that's their only fire resist. I'm going to bring Scarf Darmanitan and win late game. That's going to save you a lot of team building time, which you can put towards making better, Thunderous or Gallade sets that are going to be harder to build. Next, I draft the 8-point Mon that I was referring to earlier to complement Thunderous, because I get a Z budget of 24. That's going to be Mismagus. Mismagus is another Mon that offensively threatens Psychic types. So now people are going to have very little reason to bring Psychic moves against me. I have no Psychic weak Mons on the team. And I have 2 stabs that threaten Psychic Mons, and an immunity, a Mon that takes 0 from... 2 Mons with insane special defense that take 0 from Psychic moves. So it's going to be... it's going to be hard for Psychic types to come against my team. And Gallade's going to have a lot more of a fun time when that's the case. So I like Mismagus a lot because it's a 105 speed tier, and it's pretty cheap. And Ghost Stab is really good because people don't really... It's not super common knowledge that you need a Dark type on a draft. So a decent amount of people will just draft no Dark type, so they won't have a Ghost resist. Or if they do, it's going to be a normal type, and it's going to be a bad normal type because most normal types are bad except Snorlax and I guess Miltank if you count that. I'm trying to think of other ones. Meloetta, but that's kind of rarely drafted. So that's Mismagus. Pretty simple Mon. It gets a lot of cool moves like Destiny Bond, Will-O-Wisp, Sub, Nasty Plot, Calm Mind, Pain Split. Moves that can help it become a sweeper in its own right, in addition to the many sweepers I already have. Next I have, since this draft needs a ground, because, as I stated earlier, all drafts need a ground, and I needed sort of a bulky water because Empoleon wasn't really going to cut it. It's weak to ground and weak to fighting, and I need bulky water to be able to take those hits. Seismitoad has a ton of neutral hits. It only has 1 weakness, which is really nice, and grass is terrible against the rest of my team. I mean, I have no other grass weaks, and I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grass resists, so Seismitoad is going to be really nice, and it's a ground type to switch into electric attacks. Then I draft Stunfisk. Stunfisk is a little bit of a synergy pick for Mega Gallade because Mega Gallade's only counters aren't Psychic types. Its other counters are mons like Torn T or Crobat or stuff like that that can predict one of my moves. Like, let's say my opponent has a Crobat, they predict a close combat, they switch Crobat in on the close combat, they take like 20, and then they threaten me out with a Brave Bird. I wanted a Mon that could punish that Crobat for going for Brave Bird, as well as set up rocks because I have 2 rockers right now. I kind of want a 3rd. And electric types are kind of nice too, so Stunfisk does that. It's only 5 points, and it's cool. I also like it a lot, its design. At this point, I'm kind of going for a little bit of meme picks because I only have 7 points left. I pick up Lickitung because it was one of the better 1-point Mons I could find. Nothing really to say there. Mostly because the last Mon I wanted was 6 points, and I needed to fill the gap with a 1-pointer. And that was the most usable one I saw. I'm not going to discuss in length how it fits with my team because I didn't really consider that. And my last Mon is Sceptile. I like Sceptile a lot on this team. I think it's a very underrated Mon. Its Subseed set is it's one of the most solid subseeders in the format, in my opinion. It has a better base speed than Whimsicott, even though it doesn't have the priority Whimsicott has. It has much better coverage than Whimsicott, if I remember correctly. It has Earthquake and stuff like that Whimsicott doesn't. And it also has a pretty solid offensive stat. It has pretty good offensive stats and over 120 base speed, which is really good for a 6-pointer. It fills a gap in my speed tiers because I had a couple mons hovering around. I have 3 mons hovering around 110. Then I have 105, and then Darmanitan, then Togekiss, which are 95, then 80. So having a nice, I believe it's 120 exactly. Not quite. I don't quite remember Sceptile speed tier, but it's around there. It helps a lot with outspeeding stuff like Starmie, which wasn't drafted, but mons with 110 to 115. Because Glade isn't going to be outspeeding those mons, it's going to be either speed tying or being slightly outsped, so having a mon to outspeed those for sure is really nice. And then, you know, it's my arrows resist, so that's always nice to have. And I didn't feel like I needed a defensive grass type with this team because I have, you know, Thundurus, Togekiss, Latias, and 2 bulky waters. So it's not super important. So that's my draft for the NPL. I guess I should go over how it fits each of the checklists here. So I have my Water Fire Grass core, I have my Fairy Dragon Steel core, I have a Psychic and Dark. And I guess I have Fighting type with my Glade. I have 2 ground types, which is good. I have 2 good hazard setters in Empoleon and Seismitoad. I wouldn't really count Stunfisk as good because I'm not going to bring it a lot. I have recovery in Togekiss, Figgy Berry Muck, Roost Lottie, and Water Absorb plus leftovers on size, as well as Nasty Plot on Miss Mages if you want to count that. Not Nasty Plot, Pain Split on Miss Mages if you want to count that. So recovery isn't the best. I guess I have Wish on like Glade too, which is kind of rare to see. Recovery isn't the best, but it's not the worst either. Togekiss is going to be having to do a lot of the stall breaking work. I definitely focused on the physical special, offensive and defensive split here. I think I focused more on the physical special offensive split than defensive split because I have a lot of specially bulky mons, but not a lot of physically bulky mons. Like this is especially bulky, this is especially bulky, this is especially bulky, this is especially bulky. But I guess this is my only sort of phys-def mon. That's a little bit weak there. Offensive synergy. I sort of explained how that worked. That was sort of the only thing I was explaining as I was going through the draft, so you guys heard my opinions on how it works offensively. I think it works offensively very well. For momentum, I have Thundurus with Volt Switch, I have Togekiss with Baton Pass, I have Darmanitan with U-Turn, and that's it. So that's pretty good. U-Turn Darmanitan is going to be able to get in threats like a Glade really easily, so that's going to be really fun to use. Like I can U-Turn on their bulky water that comes in, bring in Thundurus or something, and go for Volt Switch and have a good time, especially if they're not able to get up rocks. And then at least 1 good hazard mover. I have like 4. I have Togekiss, Latias, Empoleon. I guess you could count Thundurus, but that isn't really that great. I guess with Prankster it's okay. Low tier value, I have Stunfisk and Sceptile, and I think Lickitung is a little bit of value since I might bring it once. Synergy with round 1 pick, I made sure to do that. Pretty much all my picks were going back to Glade and saying what would help this sweep. And I think I did a good job of doing synergy with round 1 pick. For setup, I have a ton of that. Pretty much every mon on my team gets set up. Some better than others, but you know, Nasty Plot Togekiss, Dual Dance Thundurus, SD Glade, Bulk Up Glade. My setup is quite a lot. Disruption, Togekiss is like the master disruption mon. Very little will be able to set up on me when I have a Togekiss alive. But I guess you could also say I have Taunt Glade, Taunt Thundurus, and Darm gets both Encore and Taunt. This may just gets Taunt. So I have a lot of disruption on that side too. I guess I should have put priority on here, but priority shouldn't matter all that much if you have a good defensive core. But for priority, I have Shadow Sneak, Muck, and I guess Thunderwave, Thunderous as well. So not the best on priority, but that's okay. And my speed tiers are excellent in my opinion. I have 120 here, 111, 110, 110, 105, 95, 80, and then it gets like 74, 60, and then these two are too slow to count. So, and that's slow too. So my speed tiers are really good in my opinion. Most spawns on their team will have to be running max speed to outspeed my next fastest threat. So it's going to be nice to not have to deal with extremely bulky or like adamant or modest offensive mons. So that's my draft for the NPL. Really excited to use it. I hope at least some of you learned something from this really long and hopefully educational video where I rambled a lot about my they're definitely opinions, and it's based on what I preferably like to draft. Other drafting styles might work better for you, but that's what I like to do. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time when I upload my week 1, which is versus Trev CL. Bye.